Arsenal had 2 shots on target tonight. 2. One of them was a penalty in the 89th minute. And yet somehow Arsenal still walked away with a 1-1 draw. But this game exposed 5 tactical problems that are starting to repeat themselves every single week. One of them involves Bukayo Saka. One of them involves Arteta's system. And one mistake tonight was honestly unforgivable. Let's talk about it. All right, guys, welcome back to Further on Football. Arsenal leave the Bay Arena with a 1-1 draw. And if you just look at the result, you might think, well, job done. Tough away game in Europe. Take the draw, bring it back to the Emirates. But if you actually watch the game, that performance was horrifying. It was worrying. The tempo was so slow. The creativity was almost non-existent. And in the end, Arsenal were bailed out by a late penalty. Now, sometimes you have bad nights and you have to just get the result in any manner. That happens. But what concerns me more about this is that the same problems keep on rearing their ugly head. And the first one happened 45 seconds into the second half. Let's talk about that unforgivable moment, because let's start with a goal Arsenal conceded. Because Mikel Arteta was absolutely furious with this after the match, and I understand why. Leverkusen restart the second half. Within 10 seconds, they're already forcing David Raya into a fantastic save. Corner comes in, and Andrić is completely unmarked in the box. Free header, goal. But here's a detail that makes it even worse. Now, Arteta revealed after the game that the team had been warned about Leverkusen's kickoff routines three separate times before the match. So it wasn't some kind of tactical surprise. It wasn't something out of the blue. This was just pure concentration failure. You come out for the second half of a European game and you fall asleep within that first minute. It's completely unacceptable. And it immediately put us on the back foot. Like, honestly, the bigger issue tonight probably wasn't even the goal. And that's the worst thing about it. It was how Arsenal tried to respond afterwards. Because their attacking structure, I'll be honest, right now, it's painfully predictable. We have talked so much in the past about that U shape, about that horseshoe shape. And let me tell you about that becoming a pattern. Because if you watch this game, you probably noticed it straight away. The ball goes from Zubimendi to Rice, Timber, Gabriel, and it goes back across again, around and around and around. It never goes through it. And when you're playing against a back five, in this case, you can't attack like that. You have got to break that system, break that structure, break that formation. And part of what I wanted in the summer was I wanted a moment's play. I wanted someone to be able to break the system. So, for example, when you're playing a team like, Pep's prime City, you needed a player to beat a man, which then opens up, it changes the system. By carrying the ball forwards, by committing defenders, and by creating gaps in the line, you can deal with it. But Arsenal did none of it. And we have the players. We have a Declan Rice. We have an Eze. We've got a Calafiori. We have a Miles Skelly. And everything happened outside the defensive block. It just felt like we were just constantly retaining and recirculating possession and hoping that something would happen rather than forcing the issue. And when we don't have Martin Odegaard, who I have been critical of this season and last season, Without him in full creative flow, the attack it looks disjointed, even more so. And that leads us up to the conversation that we have got to start having, because Arsenal's star man, star boy, our most dangerous player, again looked completely off it. And there is a question to be answered. And I know people don't like criticizing him, and for good reason. He has been the linchpin of this side. He has been the catalyst for everything good happening around this club now. He's been one of Arsenal's best players for years at this point. But tonight, he struggled. He couldn't beat his man. He couldn't create any separation. And he didn't look like the outlet that we usually depend on. You know, I spoke to one of my good friends, Nick, shout out to Nick, who texted me and said about it. And I said, you know, it's worrying me. That is one of my biggest concerns at the moment. Bukayo Saka, we talk about the left being dysfunctional, but Bukayo is not doing his part as well. And I'm sure if the left was more functional, then the right would reap the rewards. Look at Liverpool. Look at when they had the best out of Salah was when they had Mane out on the left. But the problem is, and he said, sometimes you've got to keep those players on the pitch for those big moments, for the ability to just create something out of nothing. It's becoming more fleeting with Bukayo Saka by the week. And some fans, you know, and I agree with it. Some are saying it's the worst performance of his career. And that might be harsh, but there's a real concern right now about his ability to, you know, take on a man. We see Madueke do it, and his physical condition just doesn't look right. You know, he's not looking explosive. He's not looking sharp. He's not even looking fully engaged. He just looks about, you know, a second or two off the pace. He doesn't look match fit. Arteta eventually subbed him, and I've got to say, for him to do that in the 59th minute, that was a bold move from Arteta. You know, to take off one of your biggest players in a Champions League game is a statement. And I think it's a good statement. I think it was the right decision to be made. And yes, you could argue, you know, Bukayo gives us that like little bit of an X factor. But lo and behold, Noni comes on, and he actually ends up playing a huge role in the moment that saved Arsenal. But before we get that, we need to talk about a tactical choice that is quietly making Arsenal's attacks far easier to defend along that side. And it involves Jurrien Timber. I have been a huge fan of Jurrien Timber since he came to the club. Now, bearing in mind, he started at a left-back role for us. I think it was the Community Shield, where he got a man of the match performance. And Arteta clearly wants his fullbacks in the half spaces. He wants them stepping inside. He wants to see them kind of operating as midfield creators, almost like tens at times. And Timber is a good progressive passer. But the problem is, he quite often becomes the person receiving in the block, the player that's expected to produce that final ball. And if you were saying, you know, which players do you want in those positions, it would be an Eze, it would be a Bukayo Saka, it would not be a Jurrien Timber. And that's not me kind of trying to give a slight at Jurrien Timber, but it's a tactical issue. He is doing the job he has been told to. He's been platformed into that position. And for me, you know, why are your fullbacks not in the wide positions and your wingers coming inside? Why are we not able to put our best players in the pockets and the half spaces in those areas? It's just not his natural game. And there's multiple moments where Timber's receiving the ball in the last line of the attack. And when that happens, it's far too predictable. You know, it's It's obvious what we're trying to do, and defenders know what's coming. There was even a late chance where then Timber heads over the bar. But the biggest question is this, like, why are Arsenal trying to rely on our fullback in those creative zones instead of the natural flair and attacking players? It feeds directly into that issue we've had, with these blocks, and teams even in Europe seem to be wanting to do that. This is a European Champions League team playing at home and causing us issues by essentially blocking those zones, and that's the midfield structure. Getting into that midfield structure, I'm worried about this. Do we call it a double pivot? This partnership between Declan Rice and Martin Zubimendi. Because early in the season, it looked absolutely fantastic. I was saying Zubimendi prior to the season starting would be our transfer of the season. I was saying that he'd probably be the Premier League transfer of the season for what he gives us. Because at the beginning, I knew it would give us that balance and control. It started off, and there were even moments where, Zubimendi was coming into the pockets and he was the person driving up with Rice sitting back. He was giving us the progression. But right now, it just doesn't feel right. That midfield shape is just dysfunctional. They're almost, between Declan Rice and Zubimendi, they're sharing the same role. There's not the players aren't playing in unison. They're playing synchronized, and that's okay in parts of the game, in small moments. For them to go over and over and over again, it doesn't seem to work. Because if you look at our previous midfield duos, the prime duos, so you're looking at your Gilberto and your Vieira, or you're looking at your Emmanuel Petit and Vieira. That's my personal favorite. When one went, the other sat. And then when the other one went, then the original one sat as well. Neither one of Zubimendi or Rice consistently attacks the box. And if you look at the pass maps, they either end up kind of in the same zone, whereas ideally you want that kind of staggered, one after another, one player holding, one player arriving late into those attacking areas. Instead, both then stay out of the block, which feeds again back into that same problem that we were just talking about. No penetration, sideways passing, ball retention. And that's why we then end up with Victor Gyökeres, trying to get on the end of deep crosses. And I've just talked about Jurrien Timber not being played to his strengths. I'm talking about our midfield duo not playing to their strengths and, complementing each other. And now I'm talking about Victor Gyökeres not playing to his strength. Because we know his best strength is in transition. We know when it's, an open game or a high line. But despite all of that, Arsenal have still escaped with a result. Because in the end, we were bailed out. Noni Madueke drives into the box and wins what a lot of people are going to call a soft penalty, and I can completely understand it. Looking at the different view, it does seem like, his leg is caught by the defender. But regardless, you got to take them. If someone puts it on a plate for you, you have to take it. And Kai Havertz steps up in the 89th minute against his former club. Cool, composed, goal, 1-0. I think it's actually Arsenal's latest penalty goal since Nicholas Bentner in 2010 in Europe. Right now, let's try to get some positives because we've got away with one playing away in Germany. They've got a relatively good home record. We get to bring it back to the Emirates now. We get to kind of, we just start again, fresh game. And right now, I think Opta give us about a 79% chance of progressing. I mean, if you care about that or not. But the reality is, if Arsenal play like this again in the second leg or in the Carabao Cup final, we might not win anything. We've got to improve the tempo, increase the tempo. We need to improve the creativity and make more risk. We need to stop and prevent this horseshoe shape happening over and over and over again. But we do have it in our hands. The Premier League is in our hands. The Cup final is in our hands. And the Champions League right now, we are still in it. It's 1-1. We can't play worse than that, can we? But I want to hear from you guys. Is it just a bad night in Europe because I am struggling right now? Or are these tactical problems starting to actually become a real concern for Arteta and for us fans? Let me know in the comments. Oh, it's a hard one, but it's not a loss. You guys know football. I just talk it. Forward out.